Another way of doing symmetrical paper cutting is in a style that is from Latin America, and it is called papel picado. I've had the privilege of doing quite a few papel picado workshops over the years. It's similar in a way to this model in that it's symmetrical, but it's very different as well. Now, if you look up here at the flags above my display here, these were all done. It's actually a Mexican style of paper cutting originally. And you can see here on this, sometimes it's done as a mask, but sometimes it's just done as a design. And many people in the United States use these plastic flags for parties and celebrations and birthdays and so forth. Now, it's really cool because many of these are cut with a pair of scissors, but many of them are cut with an X-Acto knife. And you can see that if you look at these carefully. But the secret is that they're all folded in half once. So what I did is I took a piece of paper, and I purposely used origami paper because you could see your drawing on this side. And I also wanted to take advantage of using a hole punch, which is often used in paper cutting as well. So the tools you pretty much need for any kind of paper cutting would be scissors, an X-Acto knife, a hole punch, perhaps a glue stick, and also needles, straight needles to hold a paper in place if you're doing something very complicated. So those are the things. And also I like using this removable double-sided tape. So if I wanted to tape something down to hold it in place, because my paper might be sliding, this is removable. So you want to make sure, like if you go to buy double-sided tape, that it says removable on it, okay? Just remember that. All right, so I'm just going along here now, and I'm adding a variety of things. And now I'm going to be creating a flag. Now this one is on black paper. I don't have any paper that's as large, so I'm going to use this piece. And remember that the secret to paper cutting is always preserve part of the folded edge so that it all ends up being one piece of paper. But I'm going to show you something else that's really, really fun too in a minute. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is simply to cut out my edges. Okay, so I'm going to go here and then here, and I'm just cutting out the edges. I drew this ahead of time. I was just trying to draw some simple shapes. Now there are a lot of famous paper cutting artists, and one of the most famous is Matisse. And Matisse saved all his pieces of paper, and that's what I'm going to do today as well, because I'm going to use these pieces for something else later. So even though this piece doesn't seem like it's anything now, I'm saving it, okay? Sometimes I give out envelopes to my students, whether they be elementary students, middle school, or high, and tell them just put your extra pieces in this envelope because we're going to come back and use that later. Another thing I want to do is, since I want to preserve part of the folded edge, I also do not want to go all the way out to the edge with my cutting. So I'm going to erase a little bit here to remind myself. And I'm going to just end it a little bit earlier, and you'll see that in a minute here, okay? Now, I could either cut this with scissors or with an X-Acto knife. I'm going to start out by cutting it with scissors because I can do that. And remember the rule, always preserve part of the folded edge and keep your cutting hand stationary and move the paper so that you're not twisting your hand all around. Okay? So here we go with that. And we're really having a good time doing this. I am anyway. I hope you will too. So I'm going here. And it's so much fun to just let your creative juices flow. And the other really exciting thing about paper cutting is that almost every culture employs some sort of paper cutting. Asian cultures are quite famous for it. So are cultures from Latinx, and also One culture that's specifically very, very famous for it is Poland. Polish paper cutting is really exquisite, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But right now we're sticking with Papel Picado, and you can see I have this piece I just cut off, and I'm going to save this piece because I'm going to use it for something later on. So you can see I have this piece as well, which is kind of cool looking. Okay? Now, another thing you can use is a hole punch. And to make little circles, I just want to get in here, and I'm going to make some circles. And if you look at the examples over my head, you can see that some little circles were made probably with a hole punch. Okay, so that's fun, right? What could be more fun than a hole punch? All right, now I kind of messed up on this side, so I'm going to change it as I cut. I'm going to go a little bit deeper, and I'm not going to worry about the fact that I'm actually going to cut out some of my design. I can move it over. That's the thing, is as an artist, you're constantly making decisions. You're doing a lot of creative problem solving, and that's what artists do, and that's what we're good at. So, you know, more power to the art world here. So there is that edge as well. So now I'm going to use my X-Acto knife to cut out some of my other organic shapes. Now, like I said before, I think I'll draw a few more on here now. I'm going to draw another one of this kind of cool shape here. And I'm going to move this shape over a little, like that. And I think that's, maybe add another one of these shapes over here, like this. Okay. So now I'm just going to take my X-Acto knife. Now I can get very detailed if I wanted to, but I'm going to try to stick to being a little bit simpler and just cut out some of these shapes. And when we come back in a few minutes, you will see the finished piece. But you really don't need to. You could actually stop at this point with your students and not even show them the finished piece. Just stop here and then let them get to work. So I think we can stop and come back. Okay. So I have all these pieces. Okay. Let's see here. Are you still videotaping me?
Yeah, videotaping. Just you can start when you're ready. I'll cut. I can show it. I mean, faster. I can play faster.
I can go back to using my scissors too, quite a bit. And now I realize I wanted to put a few hole punches here. I forgot about these. I'm only putting a half of a hole punch. That's fun. And then we come in here. I prefer to work with my scissors than the X-Acto knife. To me, it's just more enjoyable. But some people really like that X-Acto knife. I find it to be hard on the hands. Okay. And again, putting so you can see, like with your students, you can ask them to save all the pieces that they cut away from their paper picado, and maybe later on do something dealing with Matisse and the way that he used all those different organic shapes in his paper cutting. So that's another idea. And it gets a little harder as you go because the paper gets flimsier. You're cutting away, cutting away, cutting away. And it is a little bit more challenging. But I think that you will all find that it's quite rewarding at the end when you get to see your final product. And we always say in art education that the process is more important than the product. And that's true. The process of learning surpasses the final product. So again, I'm back to the X-Acto knife. Okay, I'm just gonna, I just purposely just cut the two corners, and then it's a little bit easier for me to come in now with the scissors than it is for me to keep using the X-Acto knife. And you know for yourself what works best for you. And so you just do whatever works best for you as an artist. Of course, with the young children, you can't use an X-Acto knife. But I've actually seen this lesson taught where the children tore the paper. And I'm going to demonstrate some of that a little bit later on about tearing paper rather than cutting. So now you can see over here, I'm using all my pieces to create a very interesting design, which I could then keep switching around and changing and trying different ways of doing it, and coming up with what I thought was the best design in the end, probably using a bigger piece of background paper. But that way, again, you're not wasting your materials. You're using them. You could even save the little dots from the hole punch if you were so inclined. Okay, there's only one more piece here. And actually, I only cut out one of the shapes. I accidentally missed the other one. So I guess I'm going to have to go in here again with the X-Acto knife for this one. And that's the thing about art. We all make mistakes, and so we have to make decisions. We're constantly making creative decisions, and we're constantly problem solving. And our minds are active, and this is very, very good for children and for adults. So here's this piece. There we go. Okay, and so I have one more piece, but I kind of like what I've come up with here. And this is a very interesting design. I have one more little piece to cut, but to finish it off. And of course, if I were to mount this on another color, it would be beautiful. And that's the thing, is that you could use a variety of colors in the background. Think about when you do stained glass windows with children, and you use different colors of tissue paper or transparent paper in the background, and how beautiful that is. So there's all my extra pieces that I have. And here is my Papal Picado flag. I think you can see that it's similar but unique compared to the other flags that are up there. Okay, now we're going to, and then of course we have this second project too, second idea. Now we're going to move on to my favorite sort of paper cutting. I do want to show you, before we move on, the idea of flat cutting. Now in paper cutting, a lot of paper cutting is folded cutting. In lots of elementary schools, people will make a folded cutting of a snowflake, very common idea. But sometimes people will do something where they fold it in half and then fold it in half again, and then they get a four-sided image. And so there's a lot of different ways to do it. But one of the things that I personally really enjoy is doing a flat cutting. And a flat cutting is something where you would, like this cutting right here, of an image I made for the Maryland Hospital for Children. And this was a piece of black paper laying flat, and it's sort of like drawing with an X-Acto knife. And anywhere that you see white is where the paper was cut away, and anywhere that you see black is where the paper remained. So it is a little tricky, because you have to make sure that you're preserving part of the folded edge at all times. I think I have a couple other examples here of a flat cutting. This is a folded cutting, a 2 repeat done by a student at Towson. Here is another 2 repeat of a paper folded. But here's a flat cutting. This piece actually was folded at first, and the edges were cut out, and then it was unfolded, and the person just cut away the white areas. So that's considered a flat paper cutting. A paper cutting done by an Asian friend of ours. I believe he's from Japan, but the writing there we think is Chinese, so we're not absolutely sure. But he folded the paper very quickly and cut with a pair of scissors, and then opened it up, and there he had those birds flying. I don't know how he did it, but it was pretty amazing. The tree over here, just the white was removed and the black paper remained. And that was just done with an X-Acto knife. Okay? So those are flat cuttings. Folded paper cuttings are thought of in terms of repeats. How many repeats? Okay? So, for example, this one, you would say, had 2 repeats. Of course, you can always add color on top, and that's very, very handsome. And then here's another one where this was folded in half, and it was cut. Some of it was cut with scissors, some was cut with an X-Acto knife, and then a little bit of color was added. So those are ways that you can do it. The first one I'm going to show you would be, and I once again, I'm using origami paper, would be where you could fold your origami paper into a triangle. And this is the distinctive of Polish paper cutting, where they use the square into a triangle shape, like this, okay? And then, if you wanted to, if you were to cut out like a half of a heart here, you would say, well, that's only one. No, it's 2 repeats. Each half makes the whole, okay? So, and then if I were to fold it again, like this, I would once again be making a 4 repeat. There would be 4 repeats no matter how I would cut this out, okay? But the 6th repeat, interestingly enough, is the fold that teachers have used for years and years in showing children how to make snowflakes. Now, I find this very interesting because I have learned over the years that no 2 snowflakes are alike. So I always tell my students, I don't want any 2 paper cuts to be anywhere near alike. So I don't want anybody to think there's a right or wrong way to do this. And so what they're going to do is they're going to fold their paper in half, then fold it in half again. And then what they're going to do is they're going to take this piece of the paper, fold it up like this, and this piece like this, and then sort of tug at it a little. And it almost looks like an ice cream cone. That's what it reminds me of. So it looks like that. Now, if I wanted to do a 6 repeat, I could cut right across here. It would be sort of roundish if I did that. And I could cut shapes out of this on each side. A snowflake actually has 6 sides. So that would make it a 12 repeat. So watch this, everybody. I'm going to fold. Think of this side as a line, and think of this side as a line. And then fold it so those 2 lines come together. It'll still be in the cone shape. Okay? And this, I'm kind of glad I picked orange. And if you'll watch carefully, now some students like to draw what they're going to cut ahead of time. And some people just like to start cutting. I'd say for this paper cut, it's fine either way. So what you're going to do is you might want to remember the rules though. You always want to preserve part of the folded edge. Remember that even a sliver cut out is going to show. You don't want to just cut a straight line. You want to remove something, even if it's just a sliver, okay? All right, so here we go. We're going to do the 6 repeat. Just remember that this point here is the center, and this here is your outside edge. So I'm just going to go in here right now, and I'm actually going to very carefully, watching what I'm doing, I'm going to cut into this, and I'm going to create my outside edge. Okay, and I never know what I'm going to get. Okay, so all those pieces are gone. And I want to look at this again. I see that I haven't done it exactly right, so it's close. So I'm going to go back in, and I'm going to make this a little deeper here. Now, when I say I haven't made it exactly right, what I mean by that is that I missed some of the folded area. So I want to be careful to get it all because it's a 12 repeat, 6-sided paper cut, and it doesn't have to be a snowflake, it's just a paper cut, okay? And this piece here has to be pulled out. So this looks pretty good. Now I have 2 folded edges left. If I wanted to, I could use my hole punch again. I can come in here if I want and use my hole punch, remembering to preserve part of the folded edge. Might just do that much. I can remove some of my paper, just a small amount at a time, just a sliver. I can I can go to the other side now, and I can remove a larger area if I want. I can remove a whole big area if I want. Okay, like this. I can come back in again. Maybe I'll try using my hole punch one more time. And so I don't even know what I'm going to do each time that I work with paper, but I do know that children love it, and there's a magical thing that happens when the child gets to open their paper cut, and there's also a lot of creativity involved, even though there is skill involved too and rules, or the whole thing is not going to work out. It's not going to hold together. So, and these lessons that I'm doing right now are because we cannot be on campus to use more complicated materials, so we're doing lessons that are dealing with simple materials that have a lot of learning. So now I'm going to open this up, and when I open it, you're going to see that I have a 6 repeat, but it's a 12 repeat, excuse me, but it's going to show 6 sides. So if you look here, you can see, let's count how many of these like OG shapes we have here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So people would say, oh, that's a 6 repeat. No, it's actually 12. It's because it includes every whole thing is 2 halves. So that turned out quite nicely. Now, if you look here, because of the way I punched the holes, some of them didn't come out as good as others. But that's just the way it is, and we go on. So that's our 6 repeat or our 12 repeat. Now the next one we're going to do is going to be the 8 repeat. Actually simpler. For this one, you're just simply going to go into the triangle, into another triangle, open it up is my advice. Fold, remember, think of this as being a line and the center as a line, and bring that line up to the center. So this one's going to sort of look like a kite. Now, and then this one like this. This is really good too for children. All of these are great for math because you can talk about fractions, you can talk about all kinds of mathematic, geometry operations, and so forth in doing paper cutting. So then I have this like this, it looks like a kite, and now I'm going to fold it one more time, and this is going to be an 8 repeat. So this is an 8 repeat right here. Looks like it's got 4 separate sides, but each one, remember, is half, so that makes it 8. And for this one, again, the same rules apply. Talked about always preserve part of the folded edge, remove at least a sliver, keep your cutting hand stationary, and move the paper. And also, if you're cutting a point, you want to cut it in from 2 angles so that you don't rip the paper. But I wanted to show you one more thing. Let's say, for example, you really are trying to be very conscious of conserving paper and not wasting. So when the students are cutting their shape on their outer edge, and they're cutting their design, their outer edge design, which is the open edge, not the folded edge, you may find that they have a big piece cut off at the end. And the interesting thing about that is I always save these. And for example, I might glue this down onto a piece of paper, and later on, not at the time, not while they're cutting their paper cut over here, we might just save them. Okay, so let's say I have a piece of white paper. This looks sort of like Halloween or something, but like this. And then I just have the children, as a follow-up activity, glue their outer edge down. Now, some kids will not have an outer edge because their paper fell apart, and that's okay. But if they do, you can have them glue it down on a piece of white paper, and then put these away. Have them put their name on the back. And then maybe towards the end of the year, you're going to have them do some sort of scene, and you can say, well, you already have a framed paper ready for you, and they can do their drawing or design or artwork inside the frame that they created from their paper cut. So also with the 8 repeat, you want to remember, and I should have mentioned this earlier, but you always want to cut into points and corners from 2 directions so that you don't end up with it tearing or looking in a way that you don't want it to look. So now with the 8 repeat, you can go any way you want. You could see how cool it would be with children doing this. But like, let's say, for example, you want to just make this one very geometric looking, whereas the other one I made recently, this one's a little bit more organic looking. This one's going to be very geometric looking. So I'm going to think in terms of geometric shapes. So I'm going to start out with a triangle. And I'm going to create maybe another kind of a line here coming in. And I have to be careful not to cut where I don't want to cut. And then I might say, well, I want to make the outer edge an interesting shape. So maybe I'm going to go in here again with another line. And I'm thinking much more geometrically rather than organically this time. So that could be the only instruction you would give your class. Use geometric shapes to create your paper cut. Okay. Now this outer edge here, I want to do something very interesting with this. So I'm going to go in here like this. And I'm going to cut a large shape out. And then if I want to add some details to this, I could come in here very carefully. And this is where, you know, sometimes you might need tape, or another thing I've used before is a paper clip to hold things in place so they don't shift on me so much. And so I might do something in here where I'm using my X-Acto knife. Maybe making a small rectangle. Okay. So far today, people, you have seen you've seen a symmetrical paper cut where you've saved all the pieces, and you've seen a paper picado paper cut where it's been a little bit more like cutting out of. And then you've seen a 6 or 12 repeat paper cut. And I showed you the 8 and 10, but I figure you can see, I mean, I showed you the 4, excuse me, the 2 and 4 without me actually demonstrating, because I figure you can figure that out on your own. And we're going to show one more. I have so many more things I could show you, but I think it's probably enough for one day. But here's a geometric paper cut. Now, I never know what I'm going to get, and that's part of the excitement of this process. So remember, this is supposed to be an 8 repeat, but it's definitely coming out more of a 4 repeat. And you can see how different it is from the other one that I just did. And I think that that's the exciting part about it. So I've been doing paper cutting for a long time. It's one of my favorite things. All right, so the very last one we're going to do today is going to be the 10 repeat. So here's the 8. Here is the, or the, you could say the 4 repeat, or the, it's actually 8 repeats. Here's like 6-sided, but 12 repeats. And now I'm going to do one that I very rarely share with people because it has a lot of American folklore associated with it. And it goes back to the person who created the American flag. And who was that? Well, that was Betsy Ross. And evidently, according to folklore, this particular paper cut came from her. And what happened was she was supposed to design the American flag. And when General Washington came to speak with her about the American flag, the design included a 6-pointed star. And evidently, Betsy said, but why General Washington? I can make a 5-pointed star with just one snip of the scissors. And I'm going to show you that right now. So this is a little different. And this is not Polish paper cutting. This is American paper cutting. And you're going to take a square of paper and you're going to fold it into a rectangle. And with that square, so you can see this is now into a rectangle, you are going to think of this corner over here as a pointer. And just look over here and approximate what's about 1/3 of the way down. Actually, for me, I have a little ruler right here, so I can actually see, for the first time I've ever done this, what is about 1/3 of the way down. It's right about here. And I'm going to go to, it's kind of interesting, about 1/3 of the way down. And I'm pointing the pointer right there. And I'm going to crease it. Now, think of this as a line, and this is a line. Bring those lines together. Now, this sort of reminds me a little bit of when you make paper dolls when you're little. And here's an example of the paper doll idea, where you go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Just remember, always preserve part of the folded edge, and you can end up with a very interesting paper doll, quote unquote, sort of image. So here, we'll go back to this. You fold it in half this way, and then you bring this, you think of this as a point. You bring this point to 1/3 of the way down. You have this line and this line. You fold this back. Now watch why it's so much like a paper doll. Now you're going to go back like this. And if you were about 1/3 of the way down, this should fit in there very nicely to make a lovely, another sort of ice cream cone looking thing. And then your last step is you can either cut from this direction down or from this direction down. It makes no difference. And with one snip of the scissors, as Betsy told us, you can end up with a 5-pointed star. According to her, a perfect 5-pointed star. So I'm going to cut this like this. Watch carefully. Now let me say one thing. If you cut very tight like this, you're going to get a very skinny star. If you cut like this, you're going to get a very fat star. And actually, you might not get much of a star. You're going to get more of a 10 repeat paper cut. But if you cut at a medium angle like this, and you have one snip of the scissors, and you open it up, this is one of my big secrets, everybody. So here you go. You're going to end up with a beautiful, perfect 5-pointed star. Sections have been cut out of it. You can refold it and have certain sections cut out of it. Here's a smaller one that was cut a little bit different angle and then laminated. So you can see that if I were to refold this again and I were to want to make it more complex, not just a plain star, I have 2 folded edges here and 1 open edge. The open edge I shouldn't mess with, or it's not going to look like a star. When I was teaching many years ago, I used to make little tiny stars for my students. And if they were doing a really great job or really concentrating on their artwork, I would put one by their table. And that was a big hit, even with middle school kids. So anyway, so I'm just taking my X-Acto knife now, and I'm cutting some shapes out of this star. I want to see what happens. And it's a little hard because it's kind of thick. So you have to be patient and get your star just right. Okay. Actually turning it a little bit here. I could have just been cutting that scissors as well, but I thought I'd be a little bit fancy. You can cut a little bit on the side here, people. Like if you wanted to make it a little bit different. Now remember, some people just want to make a 10 repeat. They don't want to make a star. So if that's the case, that's fine. I'm not trying to say everybody should make a star. I just thought it was kind of a cool story dealing with the history of our flag. Whether or not it's completely true, I've read it in a few places. I'm not sure, but it's kind of cool folklore anyway. All right. There we go. And that's it for this. I want to see everyone try. I cut the edges a little different just to see what would happen. I want to see everybody try to do, I'd say, 3 different of these paper cuts. Symmetrical paper cut, sort of the puzzle idea, or the paper picado paper cut, sort of the paper doll paper cut. You could do the 6 to 12 repeat, or the 4 to 8 repeat, straight symmetrical paper cut, which is fine, or you can do a flat cutting. So there's so many choices, and I just want you to experiment, explore, see if you can extend this idea. Maybe somebody wants to do a flat cutting, and that would be fine as well. So there were many ideas that I presented, and now it's your turn to go and enjoy paper and cutting.